Good day, poker peeps. This is Sky with Smart Poker Study, and I'm going to tell you how my student ended a 32 buy-in downswing. So my student sent me an email, and this is what he said in the email. Basically, down 32 buy-ins since we last spoke. Although I was up going into this past weekend, I just started playing awful and looking for reasons to call rather than reasons to fold. Please have a look at these hands. I realize I'm back to tilting after a few bad beats and I need to log off. So he realized that he's got some emotional, some tilting, some anger issues that are causing him some of these losses. But I always know it's often more than just anger, or that anger is actually often causing you to play strategically in negative EV losing ways. So of course he sent me his hands. So the first thing I did was I downloaded or imported the hands into my database. Now, take a look at this. In 6 days' time, he lost $800, 37,000 hands played, lost $800 at 25 NL, that's 32 buy-ins down, with a win rate of negative 8.6. Now, anytime you're in a big downswing, you want to step away from the tables, go through your database, filter for different things, or just look at big losing hands and, look through your database in different ways. But you want to spot some patterns. What is potentially causing your losses? What is the big culprit behind you losing so much money? So take a look at these hands down here. Do you see a pattern to his play? Pause the video if you want more time to kind of analyze the numbers, look at the hands, look at the actions and stuff. But the pattern that I found to his play is right here. His pre-flop action, tons of calling. There were 16 hands where he lost 100 big blinds or more. Raise, call, 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 call. 14 out of the 16 hands, he was the pre-flop caller. 2 hands, he was the pre-flop raiser right here. So just seeing that pattern gave me a good indication that, yeah, calling is this player's issue, and it's potentially what is leading to so many losses. But that was just on the button, right? You got to see if this pattern persists. Now, looking through at all the other positions, yeah, it totally persists. 16 hands on the button, 2 as the raiser, 14 as the caller. He lost, out of the 16 hands, 88% of them, he was the pre-flop caller. The pattern persists other than the big blind. For some reason, that was just an outlier, something different. 7 hands where he lost 100 big blinds or more, all 7 as the pre-flop raiser. But, counting that, 68% of his 100 big blind or greater losses were as the pre-flop caller, you can see. So if you had a student like this, or a friend of yours approached you and said, hey, what can I do? How can I turn the tide? What should I be doing right here? What advice would you give? Well, I'll tell you my advice. My advice was to simply stop calling pre-flop right now. Nix the calling. No more of that. That is causing so much of your pain, right? I wanted him to course correct 180 degrees. Calling is in his pre-flop plays that he makes, and I wanted him to just get rid of it, because calling and then also raise and then calling 3 bets, calling 4 bets, it is killing him. I told him, do not call at all pre-flop for the next few days. This isn't a strategy to employ for the rest of your poker journey. No, for the next few days. The idea was to get your mind right, play all post-flop hands as the pre-flop aggressor, get to winning, and then start calling again. Now you might be asking, Sky, how will no calling help? Isn't calling a part of the game? Totally, it is a part of the game, but no calling will help, because aggressive poker is winning poker. When you are the aggressor, when you're throwing out the bets, the raises, the check raises, you don't have to hit a hand to win the pot. Your opponent can just fold to your aggression and award you the pot right now. Calling often leads to loss. And that's one of the reasons why you target the fish, you target the calling stations, because they can't help but stay in with top pair, weak kicker, second pair, third pair, the weak gut shot, and they overpay. They call your 3/4 pot bet because they just cannot fold. They have to call, right? Well, calling does often lead to loss. Now, when you are the aggressor, you have the stronger range. You were the pre-flop raiser. You have aces, kings, queens, ace, king in your range, whereas your opponent who called probably doesn't have that. When you're the aggressor, you're often in position as well, because who is the most likely caller of your open raise? Yeah, somebody out of the blinds, right? they put that half a big blind in, the full big blind in, they don't want to give up that money easily, they're the most likely caller giving you position. And then plus, you are the aggressor pre-flop, you're often going to be the c-better on the flop, which means, well, as you know, most players fold to c-bet somewhere greater than 50% of the time. So there's a pretty good chance your c-bet is just going to win you the pot on the flop right there. And also, because of those three things, being the aggressor is easier poker. When you are putting your opponents to the test, they're the ones that have to make the decision. You're throwing out the 2/3, 3/4 pot c-bet, whatever the play is, whatever the size is, they have to now consider what your range is. They know that you have stronger hands in your range. They often have to contend with you being in position, and they just automatically fold to those larger c-bets. Now, when you're the caller, you have a capped range. When you call, you're telling your opponents that you don't have aces, kings, or queens for the most part. Calling is also hopeful poker. You know that you often call with ace-5 suited for that flush potential, straight potential, 10-7 suited, 10-8 suited, 10-9 suited, you know, those suited gappers, connectors, and whatnot. Also pocket pairs, you're hoping to hit a set with your pocket threes when you call. It's hopeful poker, right? You're hoping also that your opponent doesn't continue putting out tons of bets because you just want to see that flop, want to see the turn. Also, you're also out of position often when you're the caller pre-flop because you're calling out of the blinds often. And an interesting idea, calling pre-flop just leads to more calling because you call with those speculative hands and you hope to hit a straight, a flush. You often do hit your flush draws and straight draws. Well, that just leads to more calling. Your opponents are going to be making c-bets, but you don't want to give up your equity, so you call a little bit more, right? Passive play pre-flop leads to more passive play post-flop. Now, for the student, I gave him a little bit more additional advice. I told him to read Jared Tendler's book, The Mental Game of Poker. And what he did was he went and picked up the audio book for it, and he listened to it over and over again over the next 3 or 4 days, and it's really helping him stay in control and stay focused. I also told him to drop down in stakes because all those big losses at 25 NL, yeah, those are really hurtful. 32 buy-ins down. So drop down in stakes so the money isn't as impactful. If you continue losing, well, losing $10, one buy-in isn't as bad as losing $25, one buy-in at that higher stake, right? So I told him to drop down to 10 NL and assess your mental game every 10 minutes. So set a Tabata timer on your phone, and when it goes off, ask yourself, how am I playing? Am I angry? Am I tilting? Am I making good decisions? If not, well, take a break or maybe end your session entirely. But if things are going well, you're making good decisions, totally keep on playing. So that's the additional advice I gave him. So since then, of course, he made all these changes. Let's look at his results. Wow, look at that. He hasn't won back his entire losses, 32 big blinds, but he is up 12 big blinds in just a really short amount of time. Since November 4th, 43,000 hands. Like I said, he plays a ton of poker, right? But he's up $308, positive 4.17 big blinds per 100 hands. Things are looking really good. I sorted this by his biggest losing hands. We could see not as many 100 big blind losses as he had before, but all of these, even though they're losses, at least he's raising and not doing a lot of calls. Well, I mean, there's some examples of calling still, obviously, right? It's really hard to break some of those bad calling habits, but in general, he is doing way more raising than he's doing calling, and this is at least giving him the opportunity to win more pots by his opponents folding or gaining more value when he has the strongest hands. Like I said, being the aggressor is easier and winning poker. Now, a couple things to point out. His 2-bet and then call a 3-bet, it's now at 35%. It was at 53.5%. A big difference right there. His call pre-flop 2-bet is at 4.4. It was during that losing time of 32 buy-ins. It was not positive. It was 12% calling. So he's doing so much less calling of 3-bets, less calling of 2-bets. But here's an interesting thing. That prior slide, I didn't show you his 3-bet nor his 3-bet steal stats. But during his downswing, his 3-bet was 6.3. His 3-bet steal was 8.8. Now that he's in his winning ways, positive 12 buy-ins, actually a little bit more than 12 buy-ins because he's incorporated some 10 NL as well as 25 NL. But anyway, he's up right now. His 3-bet went from 6.3, now he's at 11.2%. His 3-bet steal was 8.8, now it's 13.6%. He's replaced some of those losing calls with winning aggression, and I'm absolutely loving it. So let's get to the sticky note. What can you take away from this video? First off, when you're in a downswing, review your big losing hands. You can look at your database as a whole, like I was doing with this student, or you can look just individually, go hand by hand. But the whole thing is find patterns to your losses. Downswings often come with some kind of play over and over again that you're screwing up, employing in the wrong circumstances, using the wrong size, whatever it might be. Figure out those patterns. And then do a course correct 180 degrees. Fully stay away from that play. Stop making bad decisions like my student was doing, just a ton of bad calls in bad spots. Those bad pre-flop calls led to bad post-flop calls. So replace one with another. So he replaced a lot of his calls with 3 bets. And look what it's done. He's turned himself from that passive player to a more aggressive player. Or, of course, if it's a bad call and it's also a bad 3-bet or a bad 4-bet, then go ahead and just fold more often too, right? Also, focus on your mental game. That's a critical aspect. When you're in a downswing, you're, potentially depressed, but for sure angry. You go on tilt more often. You feel confused in your hands. Like, your mental game isn't there when you're in a big downswing, like my student. 6 days, 32 buy-ins. I've never experienced that. But if you have, you probably know how painful that is. He expressed it to me for sure. Another thing along with the mental game, drop down in stakes as necessary, right? If you're at 25 NL, 10 NL, 5 NL players are often quite weaker than those higher stakes, right? Drop down, play against weaker players, get some wins, right? Get back to your winning ways, build back confidence, and then slowly reincorporate those plays. Or you could choose to just leave them behind entirely. I think my student, he's seen the value of being more aggressive than being passive. This is probably his new mode of play right here. All right, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up down below and subscribe to the channel. And I'll catch you in the next one.